Are you feeling as used as the car you're about to buy? Well, we may have the solution this week on Motoring 98.
TSN's Motoring 98 is brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will, and Midas for new, longer-lasting, performance-friction carbon metallic brake pads.
This week we're in Whistler, British Columbia, where along with skiing, the construction boom is continuing. Everywhere you look, you see construction cranes. Hello everybody and welcome to Motoring 98. And you know, everywhere you look you also see sport utilities. It seems like every second vehicle is a 4x4. And I guess out here they make sense. Unlike standards like Toronto and Vancouver, where people continue to spend premium bucks on off-road technology they'll never use. But I guess it all boils down to image. But you know, later on we'll meet somebody who's been off-roading all his life, and image has absolutely nothing to do with it. But first, I guess we can all agree that visiting a car dealership is akin to visiting the dentist. It's not a lot of fun. But this week we're going to meet some people who are trying to make that experience more pleasurable. Along with the internet, the superstore has become one of the fastest growing segments in the ever-changing world of car sales. Although our first visit to CarMax south of the border was not a pleasant one. After being tossed off the property, our Jim Kenzie had to risk life and limb trying to take a picture of the store's marquee. Well, we were hoping for and did receive a much warmer welcome when we paid a visit to Canada's first used car superstore. It's called Car Canada, with stores in Ottawa and this one off the 401 highway just outside of Kitchener, Ontario.
Well, we offer huge choice. Choice is the biggest thing that we have here. A selection of all imports and domestic cars, trucks, minivans, sport utility vehicles. We just have over 800 vehicles on site. Most of the vehicles that we do carry here are still under factory warranty. That means they're less than 3 years old, less than 60,000 kilometers. Most of these vehicles still have factory warranty that's left on the vehicle itself. Here, for example, we're going to look at all the GMCs that we've got in stock, all the models. We touch search, we get a screen here with those vehicles, specifically model years and so forth. You want to choose one to see what kind of options it is. Just click, again, just press the screen. It comes up with a full page of options, price, the odometer reading, the year of the vehicle, and so on. You want to take a look at the picture, that comes up as well. Outside of that, a customer can do shopping from their home. If they're connected with the internet, they can visit our website and get all the information that's contained in these computer terminals here.
So, okay, I've got your ownership, and now if all the terms are mutually agreed on, which day will be good for you for delivery of your vehicle?
Well, what we have here is not salespeople by title. We have customer service reps. They're here to help the customer find a vehicle that they really want to own, because we have the choice and we have the selection. Our customer service reps are here to guide our customers into a vehicle that is their choice.
Well, I always thought car salesmen were pushy, and I thought that they were, hard to get along with. Wanted it, this is the way it is, and because I'm not a commission salesperson, I'm not under pressure to put them into a vehicle that they can't afford, which is nice. It lets the pressure off of them, and it lets the pressure off of me. And I guess I've always enjoyed the customer service end of it, and so when this job came available, it's a cool job, so that's why I took it.
Well, what we have here, instead of going out walking the entire lot, unless a customer really wants to do that, they can come in the comfort of our showroom, come to our computer terminals that we have at these podiums, and select a vehicle, any vehicle. In fact, the whole inventory is right in our system. Outside of that, we put every single vehicle through a comprehensive inspection Really, it's a takeoff from a pre-delivery inspection that a new car dealer would do on a new car that came from the factory. Because somebody owned this vehicle before, we thought that was a good idea to go over it bumper to bumper and ensure that everything is in good working order.
Customers have, and maybe rightly so, become very cynical about this industry. Do you find that there's a bit of a wall sometimes when they come in? Or
There's been some bad experiences, and that's what's really led up to the cynicism. And again, this atmosphere, what we're set up for is really to combat that and change the cynicism, make it easier and happier experience.
Can you do it?
We're doing it.
I think people are already demanding a lot more from four-wheel drives than was originally intended. They were an industrial vehicle, and I have a feeling it's like the van craze of the 70s.
Over the years, Volkswagen have earned the reputation of being the purveyors of the people's car. Well, for 98, they want to move upmarket and challenge some of the more established European marques. This is the vehicle they hope will accomplish that. On this edition of Test Drive, we take a look at the 1998 Passat. Power for the new Passat comes from a 1.8 litre double overhead cam 20 valve 4 that's good for 150 horsepower. The mathematically astute among you will have picked up on the fact that a 4-banger with 20 valves means 5 valves per cylinder. Now, VW say that using 3 intake and 2 exhaust valves improves economy, power and torque while reducing emissions. The Passat is a classic example of the good-bad situation with a turbocharger. On the good side, you've got 155 pounds-feet of torque, anywhere from 1750 to 4600 RPM. This makes this car particularly quick between 80 and 140. On the bad side, below 1740, the engine feels very lethargic because of turbo lag. Matched with this engine is a 5-speed manual box or a new 5-speed automatic that features Tiptronic. Now, stick with the latter for 2 reasons. First, the manual transmission has a linkage that feels as though part of it is made from 10-day-old calamari, and second, the Tiptronic transmission plain and simply works. One of the key advantages offered by the Tiptronic transmission is that it acts exactly like a manual transmission. As you're going into a fast sweeper, all you do is simply nudge it back a gear. You can now carry your speed all the way through the corner. With a traditional automatic, it requires you to downshift via the gas pedal, which upsets the car. It just makes so much more sense. Perhaps the most significant part of the rework, looks aside, is the new front suspension. It's comprised of 4 aluminum links, 2 locating the top of the suspension and 2 locating the bottom. The advantages are numerous, particularly when it comes to eliminating caster and camber change and unwanted feedback through the steering. The rear suspension continues to use the twist beam axle. Factor in a stiffer body and the Passat's limits of adhesion are well above any other car in this class. The response to steering input is precise, linear and quick. Understeer is next to non-existent until you hit the crazy range, and hard acceleration and braking do little to upset the composed feel. The inside of the new Passat has been very well thought through. The old funeral parlour look of old has gone in favour of a very nice finish. All the materials are top quality, the gauges are easy to see, all of the levers easy to reach, and if you want to open the sunroof, it's as simple as turning a dial and it does it all by itself. That said, there are a couple of real bonehead things. For example, the coffee cup holder is a model of engineering excellence. The only thing is, it doesn't work. It's far too shallow and it won't hold a large coffee cup. The driver's seat also falls into the good-bad category. On the one hand, you've got this pump-action handle that's brilliant because it eliminates the need for a power seat. However, it's impossible to reach the seat back recline with the door shut. What's not a pain in the back, Volkswagen have the distinction of being the only car company to build a seat where I can't touch the pedals when it's all the way back. Mind you, I wouldn't want to sit behind you right now. The rear seat with the driver's seat set in the normal position offers plenty of head and legroom. Likewise for the trunk. Not only is it wide and deep, the split folding rear seats add versatility. On the safety front, the Passat gets his and hers front airbags as well as side seat mounted airbags. stopping power comes from a four-wheel disc brake system that comes with the latest anti-lock. The stops are straight and controlled, and thanks to the front suspension, nosedive is kept to a minimum. Now, despite my criticisms, this new Passat is the best Volkswagen to date. The thing I find particularly ironic is that this vehicle is going to be its chief competitor. This is, of course, the Audi A4, which is a sister company to Volkswagen. I just hope that Peter here doesn't rob from Paulette.
About 10 years ago, a Dutch automotive journalist by the name of Fred van der Vlue got the idea of the car of the century, of celebrating a car of the century, because the automobile, as you know, has been made probably a greater impact on mankind than any other single invention. So he felt that it would be appropriate to select the one vehicle that best represented what the automobile was in the 20th century. He assembled a committee of experts, 7 people from Europe, the US, and Asia, and they did the initial distillation from about 2,000 cars down to 1,500, down to 700, and then a committee of experts, journalists and historians from around the world, 135 from 32 different countries, are the jurors on the final selection. They were given 200 cars to start with in February 1997, and this was distilled down to 100 by that committee. So now we have the task of distilling that down to 25 by next year. And the criteria were fairly straightforward. There had to have been at least 50 made originally. There had to be still 3 existing, and it had to be an automobile for use carrying passengers on public roads.
As much as they're alike, cars are like apples and oranges. Can you fairly select a car of the century?
It's a prodigious task, I will admit, but what the judges have to look at, and the judges have these criteria, what they have to look at is the car that best represents the automobile and how it has served man, how it has changed over the years, and really what epitomizes the car of the century.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns squealing fan belts. As you can well hear, this car's got a heck of a squeal to the fan belt. What's happened is the alternator belt is loose, and when you start the engine and goose the throttle, you can hear the belt screeching across the pulleys. In the case of this particular car, it's got a mechanical adjustment, and we could probably retension that alternator belt and get rid of the squeal. However, if it goes unchecked for long enough, it'll glaze the belt and wear it out to the point where it'll squeal no matter how tight it is. Now, many of today's new cars have a spring-loaded belt tensioner that automatically tensions the belt. On those cars, if you've got a terrible squeal similar to what this car has, you've probably got one of the belt-driven accessories or belt-driven components in that belt system that is seized or at least partially seized, and that's something you should check out as quickly as possible. Alternators, water pumps, some of the idler and tensioner pulleys, any of the bearings in these devices can seize up or seize up sufficiently that they don't turn at the required speed and the belt skids across that pulley, producing that squeal. If that's the case, you've got impending failure and you need to look at it as soon as possible. That's your Midas tip of the week.
A portion of Motoring 98 is brought to you by the Solder Seal Gunk family of automotive products, makers of Puncture Seal Gold and Liquid Wrench.
I've got a 1983 Toyota Land Cruiser station wagon that's had a few modifications. I've got ARB air lockers in it and a 4-inch lift kit and a winch. I've got 260,000 kilometers on it now and probably about $600 in real repairs since I bought it. I bought it new, so it's almost 15 years of hard going. I started about 22 years ago, actually. I bought my first vehicle as a trade-in on a car that wasn't running very well, and so I got a good deal on a 4x4. Figured I could get rid of it quickly if I didn't like it, and I fell in love with it, and I've been doing it ever since. And joined the Four-Wheel Drive Association here in BC and in the United States. Became the vice president of United Four-Wheel Drive Associations at 8,000 members, and did that for 3 years, and just kept on going. Overland Expeditions is a company that we set up a few years ago to do safari tours around the province of British Columbia. And we do long leads for manufacturers, things like that.
The sport utility boom. Your comments?
It's I have a feeling it's like the van craze of the 70s. Everybody is buying 4x4s, especially in British Columbia here. There's thousands of them around. Every second vehicle is a four-wheel drive. And people are buying them because of the image that the four-wheeler has given them. The image of robust, hardy vehicle that can go anywhere. And people are now demanding that they have power windows and ABS braking systems and all the other electronic things that go along with them. And they're getting too expensive. Mm-hmm. And so what's going to happen, I think, is that ultimately people will start looking for all-wheel drive station wagons, but they're not the four-wheel drives that we see today.
What does this mean for the future then, when today's generation of vehicles are just the kind of vehicles you don't want to drive? What does it mean for 10 years time?
That's a real dilemma for the hardcore four-wheeler, because there are so few vehicles on the market that can be modified now. When you're out in the bush and you've got something electronic going wrong, it's very difficult to figure it out when you have to have all the equipment, the tech equipment to go with it. For the hardcore four-wheeler, it's getting difficult. We'll have to take a good look at restoring vehicles, I think, in the future if we want to do it. Make sure that the oils are changed, the brakes are working, everything is looked after. You can look forward to a long life in the vehicle.
We're now going to head to the garage and join Bill Gardner. Get a few tips on purchasing a used vehicle, whether privately at a dealership or, like we saw earlier, at a place like Car Canada. But first, Bill, you've got to be out here in Whistler, British Columbia. I mean, you love to ski, and I know you love your coffee. And believe me, every second store here sells coffee. And they've got all your favorites: cappuccino, lattes, skinny lattes. They even have an eggnog latte that I know you die for. I mean, Bill, this is your kind of place.
Well, Brad, let me tell you the truth. I'd never even heard of half of those specialty coffees you just rhymed off, let alone having ever drank one. But let me tell you a little story about coffee. The last couple of weeks, the last few Saturday nights before I go home, I'm emptying all the garbage cans at the shop into a big plastic garbage bag. And I'm here to tell you there's been more coffee cups in there than car parts lately. So I'm starting to worry about our operation. In any case, you want to talk a little bit about the possible pitfalls of buying a used car and things you have to look for. Believe me, one of the most awkward situations we're ever thrust into probably comes up once a week here at the shop. Customer comes by or calls. He or she has got a used car or truck that they want us to analyze. Now, if it's one customer to another, it's not a big deal for us. If we've worked on that vehicle, even on a semi-regular basis, we've got a pretty good feel for where the problem areas could or might be, and we can properly advise somebody. But when it's a vehicle we've never worked on, and that's usually the case, it's usually coming from a car lot or another private seller, we're all of a sudden having to look at a vehicle that's got a lot of miles on it that we've never serviced. It's probably been serviced by a number of different individuals, maybe some body work or collision work at some stage of the game, and we've got to put this all into perspective for a potential used car buyer. Now, it's a total no-win situation for us, and believe me, I absolutely hate doing it, but we have to do it. We do our best. Now, if you're put in that kind of a situation, I suggest that you take someone with you who has a little bit of experience with cars. They don't necessarily have to be a licensed mechanic or an engineer or anything like that, but if they're comfortable with cars and they're a car kind of person, they've probably got that gut feel for what a good car is versus a bad car. And believe me, the seat of the pants feel when you drive that vehicle is worth a whole lot. That's the first thing I do when I'm analyzing the vehicle, is take it for an extended road test. And believe me, you get this gut feel for which ones are good and which ones aren't. But you still should follow that up with an under-car inspection, have the car put up on a hoist, and have somebody look underneath and see if there's any hidden damage from previous collisions. You want to get under the hood and have a look at the condition of all the fluids, lubricating oil for the engine, coolant, transmission fluid. Have a real close look at all of those. those because they'll quite often tell a story as to the condition of that vehicle. But in any case, no matter how hard you've looked at that vehicle, when you're buying a used piece of machinery, you're rolling the dice to a certain extent. So you should be prepared for the fact that that thing may need some major repairs in the not too distant future. Be careful and do the best you can in analyzing it, but be prepared for the fact that you may be buying yourself somebody else's headaches. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 98.
You're looking for a good deal on a used car? Come on down and we got a deal for you. That's coming up next on Kenzie's Corner. Ah, yes, the good old days of the used car business. Come on down and buy a car tonight or I'm going to shoot this dog. Well, that's all changing. And no less an expert than J.D. Power says that's because the consumer has more information than ever before. You can watch Motoring 98, you can read the newspapers and magazines, even surf the net. The chances are when you go to a car dealership, you know more about the car than the sales rep does. This means that buying a car has become more like buying any commodity, whether it's a computer from a superstore or a box of cornflakes from a big box outlet. You don't care if the sales rep sends you a card on your kid's graduation. You just want to have a big selection to choose from, pay the price you want to pay, and go home. Besides, would you rather buy a car in a place like Car Canada or in a trailer attached to some pickup truck with the engine running? And with the amount of money these people have invested in a place like this, chances are it's going to be here in a couple of months' time if you got a problem with your car. Compare that to that pickup truck guy. There's only one downside that I can see. That's with 1,000 cars on the lot. Man, they've got a lot of money tied up in inventory, and they've got to turn those cars over to make any money. In fact, all the superstores in the States have yet to turn a profit. But still, the experts seem to think this is where the car business is going. And as long as they're not investing my money, well, I don't care. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Earlier we saw how a good off-road vehicle can get you out of some pretty tight situations, even here in the Rocky Mountains in British Columbia. But sometimes that's not good enough and you have to go over the mountains. And when there's a medical emergency here in Whistler or on the ski slopes, the safest way to get people in and out of this hospital is by chopper. Well, that's it for this week. Make sure you join us next week as we present our annual Car of the Year program. You won't want to miss it as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
TSN's Motoring 98 has been brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will, and Midas for new, longer-lasting performance friction carbon metallic brake pads.